Before World War II, Britain and Japan shared a unique relationship. This relationship was built on mutual interests and strategic alliances that shaped the early 20th century. In the early 20th century, both island nations had common interests. They were both maritime powers with significant naval capabilities and ambitions. Their geographical isolation as islands also gave them a unique perspective on global affairs. Britain, a global empire, saw Japan as a rising power in the East. The British Empire, with its vast colonies and global influence, recognized the potential of an alliance with Japan to counterbalance other powers in the region. Japan, eager to modernize, looked to Western powers like Britain for models. The Meiji Restoration had set Japan on a path of rapid modernization and industrialization, and the Japanese leadership was keen to learn from the successes of Western nations. This period was marked by mutual respect, especially regarding naval capabilities. Both nations invested heavily in their navies, seeing them as crucial to their national security and international standing. The Anglo-Japanese alliance, signed in 1902, aimed to counter Russian expansionism in Asia. This alliance was a significant diplomatic achievement, providing both nations with a sense of security and shared purpose. For Britain, it provided a naval partner in the Far East. This was crucial for maintaining British interests in Asia, particularly in the face of growing Russian influence. For Japan, it offered international recognition and a powerful ally. The alliance with Britain elevated Japan's status on the world stage and provided a counterbalance to other regional powers. The alliance played a role in Japan's victory in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. This conflict demonstrated Japan's growing military capabilities and solidified its position as a major power in East Asia. However, Japan's growing ambitions in China began to clash with Britain's interests. As Japan sought to expand its influence in Asia, it inevitably came into conflict with British colonial and economic interests. Britain had significant investments and colonies in Asia. The British Empire's economic and strategic interests in the region were vast, and any threat to these interests was taken very seriously. Japan's expansion challenged the existing colonial order dominated by European powers. The aggressive expansionist policies of Japan were seen as a direct threat to the established colonial powers in Asia. The Washington Naval Conference of 1921 to 1922 ended the Anglo-Japanese alliance. This conference aimed to prevent an arms race and stabilize the balance of power in the Pacific, but it also marked the end of the close relationship between Britain and Japan. This diplomatic shift, coupled with Japan's increasing militarism, began to draw clear lines of demarcation. The end of the alliance and Japan's turn towards militarism set the stage for future conflicts. Former allies were transforming into potential adversaries. The once cooperative relationship was now marked by suspicion and rivalry, as both nations prepared for the possibility of conflict. The world edged closer to another global conflict. The breakdown of alliances and the rise of militarism in Japan were ominous signs of the turbulent times ahead, leading inexorably towards the outbreak of World War II. The interwar period saw a cooling in Anglo-Japanese relations. This was a time of shifting alliances and growing mistrust among global powers. The world was still reeling from the aftermath of World War I, and nations were wary of each other's intentions. The end of the Anglo-Japanese alliance in 1922 was pivotal. This alliance had been a cornerstone of Japan's foreign policy, providing a sense of security and mutual cooperation. Its termination marked a significant shift in the geopolitical landscape of the time. Britain, under pressure from the US and its dominions, aligned more closely with Washington. The United States, emerging as a global power, sought to limit Japan's influence in the Pacific. This realignment was seen as a strategic move to counterbalance Japan's growing ambitions. This decision was not taken lightly in Tokyo. Japanese leaders felt a deep sense of betrayal and isolation. They had relied on the alliance with Britain to bolster their international standing and security. Many in Japan felt betrayed, fueling nationalist and militarist factions. These groups argued that Japan needed to assert itself more aggressively on the world stage to secure its interests and ensure its survival. Economically, tensions mounted during the Great Depression. The global economic downturn exacerbated existing frictions, as countries turned inward and adopted protectionist policies to safeguard their economies. Japanese industries, reliant on exports, suffered due to protectionist trade policies. The economic strain led to increased support for expansionist policies, as Japan sought new markets and resources to revive its economy. The Ottawa Agreements of 1932 favored trade within the British Empire, disadvantaging Japan. These agreements further strained relations, as Japan felt increasingly marginalized and economically threatened. Japan's military sought resources through territorial expansion, invading Manchuria in 1931. This aggressive move was part of a broader strategy to secure the raw materials and markets needed to sustain Japan's industrial growth. Britain condemned these actions but took no decisive measures. The lack of a strong response from the international community emboldened Japan to continue its expansionist policies. Japan's invasion of China in 1937 was met with strong condemnation from Britain. This invasion marked a significant escalation in Japan's militaristic ambitions and further deteriorated relations with Western powers. Japan, aligned with Germany and Italy, viewed Britain as an obstacle. The formation of the Axis powers solidified Japan's position against the Allied nations, setting the stage for future conflicts. Military planners in both nations began to see each other as potential enemies. The strategic calculations and military preparations of the 1930s reflected the growing inevitability of a clash between these two powers. Britain reinforced its Far Eastern possessions, but preparations were inadequate. Despite efforts to bolster defenses, the British Empire was stretched thin and unprepared for the scale of conflict that was to come. The strategic calculations of the 1930s positioned Britain and Japan on a collision course. The stage was set for a confrontation that would have far-reaching consequences for both nations and the world. Tensions exploded into conflict in December 1941. Japan attacked British territories across Southeast Asia. Hong Kong fell on Christmas Day after a brutal siege. Japanese forces invaded Malaya, catching British commanders unprepared. The sinking of HMS Prince of Wales and HMS Repulse was a profound shock. It demonstrated the vulnerability of capital ships to air power. The fall of Singapore in February 1942 was a significant defeat. Japanese forces outmaneuvered and overwhelmed British, Australian, and Indian troops. The surrender of Singapore was described by Churchill as the worst disaster in British military history. The fall of Singapore had far-reaching consequences. It represented a massive military defeat and a blow to British prestige. For Japan, it secured vital resources and provided a strategic springboard. Japanese forces advanced towards Burma, bringing them to the doorstep of India. The war between Britain and Japan was fought on multiple fronts, each presenting unique challenges and requiring different strategies. The conflict was not just a series of battles, but a complex interplay of political maneuvers, military engagements, and economic struggles. Politically, the conflict solidified Japan's alignment with the Axis powers. This alliance was crucial for Japan, as it sought to expand its influence and secure resources. The political landscape of the time was marked by intense negotiations and strategic alliances. Britain was fighting a war on two major fronts, Europe and Asia. This dual-front war required immense coordination and resource allocation, stretching British military capabilities to their limits. This stretched British resources to their limit. The logistical challenges were immense, with supply lines often being targeted by enemy forces, leading to shortages and delays. Churchill's government prioritized the war against Germany. However, the threat from Japan could not be ignored, leading to difficult decisions and strategic compromises. Militarily, early campaigns were characterized by Japanese victories. These successes boosted Japanese morale and solidified their control over key territories. Japanese forces overran Burma in early 1942. This was a significant blow to the Allies, as Burma was a crucial strategic location. The Burma campaign was one of the most arduous theaters of the war. The dense jungles and harsh climate made combat and logistics extremely challenging. British, Indian, African, and Chinese forces fought a desperate war of attrition. The diverse composition of the Allied forces highlighted the global nature of the conflict. Economically, the war had severe consequences for Britain. The strain on the economy was felt by all, from the government to the average citizen. The loss of Southeast Asian colonies meant the loss of vital raw materials. These resources were essential for Britain's war effort, and their loss had a significant impact. Japan gained access to these resources, fueling its war machine. The captured materials were quickly integrated into Japan's military-industrial complex. Britain relied more heavily on supplies from the US through Lend-Lease. This support was crucial in sustaining Britain's war effort, providing much-needed equipment and materials. The economic cost of fighting Japan strained the British treasury. The financial burden was immense, leading to increased debt and economic challenges that would last long after the war. The political landscape within British colonies was altered. The war accelerated movements for independence and self-governance, changing the dynamics of colonial rule. Japanese propaganda found some resonance among populations eager to throw off European colonial rule. This propaganda played on existing discontent and aspirations for independence. Britain promised greater self-governance to colonies like India in exchange for support. These promises were a strategic move to secure loyalty and resources from the colonies during the war. The relationship between Britain and Japan evolved during the war. After initial Japanese successes, the tide began to turn. The entry of the US into the war was critical. Britain's forces in Asia played a crucial role in halting Japanese advances. The Burma campaign became a focal point of the Anglo-Japanese land war. Under General Slim, the British 14th Army was rebuilt and retrained. Key battles, such as Kohima and Imphal, marked a turning point. British and Indian troops successfully repelled a major Japanese offensive. These victories boosted Allied morale. Economically, Britain continued to pour resources into the Far Eastern theater. The strategic importance of India was paramount. Japan found its newly acquired territories difficult to manage. Its economy began to crumble under the strain. The political objective for Britain shifted to the post-war order in Asia. Nationalist movements within British colonies demanded independence. The conclusion of World War II marked the end of Japan's imperial ambitions. Japan was occupied, demilitarized, and underwent significant reforms. Britain participated in the occupation and war crimes tribunals. The war altered Britain's standing in Asia. The fall of Singapore shattered the myth of British invincibility. Wartime promises of self-governance led to decolonization. India gained independence in 1947, followed by other colonies. Britain's political influence in the region diminished. Economically, both nations faced immense challenges post-war. Japan experienced a remarkable economic recovery. This led to new forms of interaction with Britain through trade and investment. Diplomatic ties were restored and cultural exchanges resumed. Memories of the war remained sensitive, but subsequent generations built bridges. Today, Britain and Japan are important political and economic partners. The journey from allies to adversaries and finally to partners reflects the evolving nature of international relations.